What's up? What's happening? It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and we are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Just barely did we get on the YouTube as the show started. I did, Anthony, as the show started, I looked very small because the camera angle was not correct. So that's how the show started today on the internet. It also started with you back in the other box. Very happy to have you back, my friend. I know it's been a tough couple of days, but glad to have you back in the chair. Talk a little sports. Have a good time.
Yes, sir.
Do what we do.
Yes, sir.
So the Sixers and Knicks play Game 6 tonight. That's where we're gonna start. We'll talk a little football, talk a little Commanders starting at 4:30. Logan and I, a fresh conversation about Jordan McGee and what he both directly and symbolically means for the Commanders as we try to still unpack and really understand what Adam Peters did in his first draft as Commanders general manager. But we start with the NBA playoffs in Game 6 tonight in Philadelphia. And this story that we touched on yesterday, that Josh Harris has bought 2,000 seats for this game, along with David Blitzer and Michael Rubin and some of the other co-owners of the Sixers, because as Michael Rubin tweeted the quiet part out loud, this wasn't some charitable whatever. They are making it into a charitable thing and a good feel-good story with first responders and health workers and all these things. They're doing it because Knicks fans took over their building the last time they played, and that Joel Embiid was getting booed at home. And they're just we can't be doing this. And I genuinely find it amusing, Anthony, because Philadelphia sports fans are one of the two most provincial fan bases in the country. It's them in Boston, which makes sense because those are the two most provincial cities, right? Those are the two original cities of America, if you will. And that seems to have trickled down in ways societally that are interesting and present to modern day. And so they are very protective of kind of their own reputation. They are entitled in a certain way. And so in some ways it's really cool. You get these moments in cities like Boston and Philly, as opposed to, frankly, a transient city like D.C. Obviously, D.C. is a tremendous, I don't call this place home because I don't love it. This is not a shot at D.C. And frankly, when D.C. sports is really good, it can be up there with anybody. But part of D.C. being a transient town like it is, the nature of this city is it's not provincial. It's not, hey, I'm from Boston and so is my dad, and 17 generations before that. Yeah, dude, my great grandmother came over on the boat. The Mayflower. It's just different. But I think the funny thing about Boston is this never happens in Boston. This is very a thing that happens in Philly, where Boston is the classic, hey, bleep you, insert player here on our own team, you suck. But if someone else from the outside says it, hey, watch it, I'll punch you in the face. Philly's just nah, y'all suck. You're not good enough. No one's ever good enough. And there's a turn up my nose element to Philly fans. It's pretty freaking wild. Because maybe I just have a hard time with this because of the Sixers. But I know they're this way about the Phillies. And I know they're this way about the Eagles. There's the sense of entitlement to winning is ridiculous. And now, if I will say, you win in that town, you're Jason Kelsey, you're a made man forever. You're a beloved hero of a Super Bowl winning Philadelphia Eagles team. If the Phillies can finish the job one of these years, if Bryce Harper can finish the job in Philly, but Bryce Harper's been a remarkable success for the Phillies, despite what it looked like in year one after he left here. And if he doesn't want to win in a World Series, what are they going to make of him? Which brings us to Embiid. And this, to me, is insane. Joel Embiid has fought through so much. He could have very easily just been you know what? I'm going to get a little bit of money, and then next time I get hurt, I'm just going to shut it down and retire early. I'm a big man with foot problems. No. He diligently, it took him like 4 years to get going. Missed almost his entire first 2 seasons. Fought through it, kept going, had to be painful. Kept working on his game in the meantime to the point that he comes into the league finally and starts to play, and you're like, oh my God, this guy's a top 5 player. Last year, he wins the MVP. And unfortunately gets banged up again in the playoffs. And also James Harden had an all-time James Harden disappearing act, which unfortunately there are multiple instances of. Not exactly a new thing, but like James Harden did it again. And then this year, that dude was playing at an even higher level. Like last year's MVP Embiid had nothing on the level that Joel Embiid was playing at earlier this year. And they don't even like him. Like, Anthony, we watch the Wizards. They haven't won 50 games since the late 70s. The Sixers win 50 games every year, and they hate them. I hate them. Like, I guess it's wild to me that the lack of, for a town that's so passionate about sports, the lack of understanding of how hard it is to win is just appalling to me. And they'd be like, yeah, well, you got a bunch of loser teams. You don't know what it's like to win, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm one of the transplants. I've been here for 10 years now, almost, which is crazy. But, like, I pay attention. Decently smart. I think I know what it takes. I look at other teams who have won. And the thing is, like, y'all got a lot of the ingredients up there. Maybe one of the things that's missing is, like, the fan support, the atmosphere. And I can't imagine Ted Leonsis, even in this silly transient city, having to sell or buy 2,000 tickets. Now, I will say this. Like, because, I mean, think about what Cap One was in 2016 when the Wizards were awesome that one time. It was amazing. Arena was on fire. It was filled up. Like, DC will show up for events. I'll give us that. I will say this, though, and this is a nice thing for us here in DC as well, because the same guy that owns their basketball team owns our football team. The fact that Josh Harris is willing to do this is pretty cool. The fact that he has to do this is pretty embarrassing for Philadelphia. Have you talked to Z about this at all, Mr. Philadelphia?
I have not.
Or do you have any other anybody else in the group chat that's a Philly sports fan?
No, but I have friends that are New York Knicks fans.
Are they making the trip down?
Not this game, but they said if they were able to, they definitely would. And I think that's part of it, though. Like, New York and Philly aren't that far apart.
No, it's like an hour and a half train ride.
Yeah, so I think it's easier for, New York fans to actually go down and invade. And then when you have a situation where, people are reselling tickets, I would think the Sixers thought they were reselling to, like, Sixers fans.
No, dude, you put them on the market, and whoever buys them, you're just like, I'll take your money.
Exactly. So I think that's sort of kind of what it was. But it sucks, though.
I don't know. I'm curious what people make of this. 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. Plus, we'll look ahead to the game itself tonight. Next, before we talk a little football at 4:30 on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Jordan McGee, the story behind the Commanders' 5th-round pick at linebacker, and what makes him so intriguing as a prospect for the future, and kind of the through line with him and some of the other late-round picks for the Commanders. We'll talk about all that with Logan Paulson coming up at 4:30. But and I was just scrolling Instagram in the break. And if this series tonight between the Knicks and Sixers needed any more juice, if Joel Embiid needed any more motivation after having I don't know, would you even say he had a subpar game? Certainly not the 50 piece he had the other night, but he does a 19-point, I think it was, 16 rebound, 10 assists, triple-double the other night. And it's like, oh, bad day for Embiid.
Yeah, but he had 9 turnovers.
He did. He definitely, definitely did not have a sharp game, and some of the stuff late for him was real rough. But I think that, I was just scrolling Instagram in the break. Do you see what Charles Oakley said?
No, I didn't.
Charles Oakley, the Knicks legend on SiriusXM NBA radio, basically was like he cries all the time, like he's too big to be crying this much. He cry baby. I remind you that right now Joel Embiid is playing through. I think it's an MCL sprain. He's got some kind of knee sprain, and he's playing through Bell's palsy, so half of his face can't move.
Dang, I didn't know he's playing through that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and he dropped 50 on the Knicks like 3 games ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody questioning his toughness and his play, they're crazy.
Not to say that Joel Embiid is an angel. JoJo's had some moments this season or this series where you're like, dude, you can't grab at people's legs. Like, that's so dirty. Don't do that. But Joel is also, like, of all of the skills Joel Embiid has, there are none greater than his pettiness. I would not be surprised tonight if he drops 40 and looks at a camera or a broadcaster, or God forbid Oakley's there.
He's going to do
and
this.
No, he won't do the Anthony Edwards DMX chop.
Oh.
He'll just hit him with the crybaby face. Oh, I cry too much. Scoreboard, bro.
Yeah.
And especially if he can do it in Game 7 at the Garden if they get there.
Man.
But they, of course, got to get there. I think Jalen Brunson's going to have a huge night tonight. It's just hard because I feel like this series is so unpredictable. This series is seeing the Knicks blow game, although I really think Maxey went and won it. The Sixers blew, what was it, Game 2?
Yeah, Game 2.
Or they're up 5 with 27 seconds to go and lose in regulation by 3. And you're like, what? At least the Knicks blew their game in overtime.
I mean, there were the
respectable way.
Though, man.
There were multiple missed calls. I saw people starting to complain about that.
On Maxey 2 times.
So Maxey hits the 4-point play, which initially is miscalled as a 2, which was a wild missed call. And then they go back, and I actually thought, I was like, is he going to get screwed here? Because I saw the travel in real time. I was kind of surprised that Ian and Grant didn't talk about it. At that point, I get it, because, like, what are they going to do? Hey, by the way, they also missed the travel here. But his pivot foot clearly slides, but they're not allowed to overturn it on that. All they can do is look at the foot placement, 2 or 3. And clearly it was a 3, and the travel is not what made it a 3. But he traveled on that to draw the contact. They missed that call. But I think it was like the possession, like that was kind of justice, because the possession before, I think it was, when he drove to the lane and got destroyed.
Yeah.
And there was no call. You're just like, what? Go ahead.
I think that's just been the playoffs itself. Like, there's just so much inconsistency. And my thing is, like, if you're going to call a game tight, call it tight. If you're going to, let the guys play, then let them play. But you just got to be consistent. And I feel like too many times down the stretch of the game, like Game 2, like, those were, like, I think it was obvious fouls based on, like, how they were calling the game. And then for them to, like, just let them play, it didn't necessarily make sense to me. So,
well, then tonight,
tough.
Did you see who's officiating tonight?
Oh, man.
Scott Foster on the call.
I had to guess. I had to know it was going to be Scott. Oh, my gosh. And he's not going to be a happy man.
Well, is he? I don't know, because now all the Knicks fans are like, oh, Game 7 guaranteed.
Oh, maybe then. I'm just glad CP3 is not involved in this this series because that wouldn't be good.
Is he going to retire this offseason?
I hope so. He's still due money, so.
Yeah. I don't know. It feels. If you're an athlete, play as long as you can.
Yes.
Not just for finances. Like, when else are you going to get to play NBA basketball again? The answer is literally never. Like, when you retire, it's over. So play as long as you can.
You have a dog in this fight?
Knicks Sixers? Not really. I mean, I guess we kind of do, power rankings wise, right? We wrote the Knicks off after the Randall injury.
Yeah.
And we're like, the Sixers are still prime contenders. But then Embiid got hurt again. Yeah. I didn't count on Embiid having Bell's palsy and a busted knee.
And still dropping 50.
But also 9 turnovers. And I would say this. I don't think either of these teams has a real chance. Like, I don't know. There's something about Boston that still makes me think, like, there's a familiarity that they'll play the Celtics tough. I think, like, Denver would beat both teams. But I feel like Philly had a really good year against Denver. I'd have to go back and double-check that. But I feel like there were some matchups where Philly played Denver pretty well.
I know Embiid didn't play one of those games, and the Nuggets were really mad because he got scratched like 15 minutes before the game. And the other one, I think the Sixers actually did one with Joel in it.
Yeah.
And then you look at the Celtics, I think they went 2-1. I don't know. It will be interesting regardless.
Yeah.
It will be interesting. But no KP for the Celtics is definitely concerning.
It definitely is, which makes tonight's game between Milwaukee and Indiana, the other game tonight, really intriguing as well. Let me check this real quick. Have we seen
Damon Giannis?
Lillard questionable for the game tonight. Upgraded to questionable, which kind of feels like he's going to play type of thing. Giannis remains doubtful on the NBA injury report. He's got the calf injury. If you are Indiana at home tonight, you have to win this game.
Have to.
Because if Giannis and Dame are back healthy for Game 7 in Milwaukee, which is possible, like, that place is, the building's going to be on fire. They're going to be, like, Dame turned up, playoff Dame time turned up to 10. Giannis coming off the injury, like, he might only play 20 minutes, but he'll somehow have 20 and 20 in 20 minutes. Like, that's how that dude's going to go. And the faster you can, not that they're thinking about this necessarily, but realistically, I'm not involved. The faster you get to Game 1 with Boston, the better, because that's an extra game. Because this is going to be one of those scenarios, right? It's Thursday. So Game 1 for Celtics Pacers, if Indiana wins tonight, is probably Saturday or Sunday. If they lose, Game 7 is in that spot probably over the weekend. And that's an extra game that Boston doesn't have to play without KP. Because they won last night. They moved on. They're good. So the farther off Boston can push this series, the less games they have to play without Porzingis. And that's a big deal against, Indiana. Yeah. Miles Turner's out there having a really, really nice year. He continues to be a very, very solid player. And, like, Porzingis can play with him out on the perimeter. There aren't a lot of 7-foot mobile, comfortable on the perimeter defenders on planet Earth, and Boston happens to have one. So I would much rather play Indiana. Not to mention the ability to slow the game down. We know Indiana wants to get in a track meet, and not that Boston can't play fast. Obviously they can. But, like, if you can slow the game down and play it at your tempo because you can dump the ball down in the post to Porzingis, and by the way, probably get Turner in some foul trouble in 2 or 3 games, like, that would be huge. So it's just so much easier. I mean, winning is good because winning is good. But there's extra benefits to a win tonight for the Bucks, for the Pacers closing out this series, even beyond the immediate reality that if you lose, you might be facing all of a sudden Dame and Giannis in Game 7 in Milwaukee.
Yeah, they better close this out, man. It's going to get scary. They can't let Pat Bev also go out there and have 12 assists. You can't let him dictate the pace of the game because that's what Pat Bev did and the Bucks. And I think everything you said as far as, like, the pace of the game, speeding it up, keeping it up tempo, I think that'll be, a case for, the Pacers to go out here and close it out. I think they can, though. I got the Pacers tonight.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, the other thing, like with Pat Bev, like the good news is he's Pat Bev, and the chances that he's going to do that 2 days in a row aren't that good, or 2 games in a row.
Hey,
just
he's capable,
statistically.
man.
But he's obviously, like, look, he did it last game.
Yeah.
And in Pat Bev's mind, there's no reason he can't have 15 assists tonight because that dude lives in Delulu Island. But, like, him living in Delulu land is, like, what makes him him. He has irrational confidence, and sometimes he'll play up to the level of his confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I can't stand him, and his sports talk takes, or when he's on television, his takes suck. I don't think his analysis is very good, but, like, he plays his ass off, and he's the kind of guy you want on your team. Certainly not the kind of guy you want to play against, even if I don't think he's, like, that great of a basketball player. But, like, he will compete, and there is something to just consistently competing. Speaking of, that's actually a nice transition. Competitiveness was definitely a defining trait of this Commanders draft class, and Jordan McGee is one of those guys that embodies that. But he also embodies some other traits that seem to be through lines for Adam Peters. What can we learn about Peters from the pick of McGee, and what does the 5th rounder's future look like here in Washington? Logan Paulson and I discuss in a podcast that you haven't been able to hear yet. We're not putting this one out till tomorrow. We'll give you a sliver of Take Command on a Thursday next here on The Hoffman Show. Lynnell Willingham will stop in at 5 o'clock. Then, what do we have at 5:30 today? Oh, never read the comments. I was like, what? We have something. Can't remember what it is. Damon Amendolara at 6, so we're loaded up here on the Hoffman Show. Right now, a little Take Command preview for you. Of course, the podcast I host with Logan Paulson. And earlier in the week, we went through the first 6 picks of the draft, or the first 5 picks of the draft. Today, we recorded this morning and talked about the final 3, the undrafted free agents, and then had a long discussion about the Michael Penix selection. Logan attempted to defend just as kind of a devil's advocate. He doesn't actually believe it. Like it's funny because he was like, "I agree with you, but it kind of fleshes out the argument," which is really, I think, what's good about those kinds of discussions. But we had a good one about that. You definitely want to check that out tomorrow morning in Take Command, available wherever you get your podcasts, or on audio, or on YouTube at the Team 980. But right now, we are the first segment of our pod from today that you haven't heard before because you can't. First place to hear it right now on Jordan McGee, and not just who he is as a player, but some of the traits that he has that really show us about what Adam Peters is about as the Commanders' general manager. Here it is. Take command for you on a Thursday.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. Take Command Podcast. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulson. And crazy to think, Logan, it was just a week ago. I was in Detroit at this point, getting ready for day 1 of the NFL draft. And obviously, now we have a draft to look back on as we wrap up our draft review, kind of, amongst ourselves. I think our pal Trevor Sikkema is going to join us next week for a big, extensive draft review. So that'll be really fun. Of course, PFF's lead draft analyst. And then we'll see where we go from there. But Logan, we talked about the first 3 rounds worth of picks earlier in the week. Time to get to the late round picks, any notes that we have on the UDFAs, and then we're going to look at the rest of the league, winners and losers, so to speak. I like the way that Mina puts it on her podcast. It's winners and what are they doing? Because it's too early to really know either way, but there's certainly, I think when you look at the process for some teams, Atlanta, there's certainly some questions to be asked. But let's start off with Jordan McGee, the Commanders' 5th round pick, number 139, linebacker out of Temple. Logan, he likes to hit people. Good interview with Jordan. If you missed it on the Chris Russell show on Wednesday, he also talked to Brandon Coleman. He and Lynnell did. So worth checking those out in the Chris Russell show podcast feed. But a guy who, physical football player, tested really well in terms of the athleticism. We talked about how the Commanders have the highest average raw athletic score of all of their draft picks of any team in the league. McGee, one of the guys that's pushing those averages up. What do you see when you watch him?
Yeah, I think you see a guy, he got the single digit at Temple. He's 6'3", 225, so a little undersized for a linebacker position, but I actually really like kind of what he brings. And what I mean by that is, I think you mentioned the physical nature with which he plays with. And I think you see a guy who likes to tackle, a guy who's physical tackler. I think he's a little bit lacking in terms of block destruction techniques. And that could be a technical thing they're coaching at Temple. It could be that he's not always covered up. But I think that's something that you see an issue with. But the thing that gets me really excited about him is his ability to kind of operate in space. He's not a safety, but he kind of looks and feels and plays like that at times, especially when he's in the slot. He's kind of usually at the middle of 3, what I would characterize as a middle linebacker, but occasionally he's lined up over slot guys. He's covering tight ends. And I think that coverage profile is something that gets me pretty stoked about him, because I think when you look at Jeremiah Trotter Jr., just as an example, or, Tommy Eichenberg from Ohio State, I like those guys a lot. I like their film a lot. They're very instinctive, but they don't cover at all. And I think when you're looking at NFL linebackers in 2023 and 2024, they have to be able to cover. They have to be able to understand, diagnose play action, get into throwing windows. And I'm not sure his instincts are there yet, but I think you have a guy who at least has the athletic foundation to get there and has a feel for coverage that gets me excited, in addition to the physical elements. So I feel pretty good about the pick. I feel pretty good about his upside. I think Obviously, Fred Warner in San Francisco is an interesting comp for him, who kind of played the star, kind of a run and hit type of guy with some coverage upside. He's not that same coverage player that Fred Warner was, but it's kind of cut from the same cloth in terms of how I would characterize them. And they kind of look similar, 6'3", 222 or 225, excuse me. I think if you were to gain about 10 pounds, work on some of his techniques, I think you probably feel pretty good about his upside moving forward. And I think in the immediate future, you feel really good about his special teams value, and a guy that can learn from Bobby Wagner, a guy that can kind of carve out a role potentially moving forward in this defense.
That's really interesting to hear that, because now I'm like, how formulaic is Adam Peters? And not necessarily in a bad way, because the formula in San Francisco, it's worked out quite well. But if you're telling me like, oh, he got his Kyle Juszczyk type, if Ben Sinnott has got a little, Kyle Juszczyk, a little George Kittle to him. Jordan McGee's got a little Fred Warner to him. Like, are they hunting these same archetypes, or is it just, Adam has certain traits that he's looking for, and obviously it worked out in San Francisco that he found guys with those specific traits, and now you're seeing it again here in DC in his first draft.
So I think the thing about the linebackers, this is something that I've been pushing in terms of like my own personal linebacker evaluation for a long time, is because of how the position is changing, you need coverage players, right? You need guys that can work underneath coverages and read play actions. Like the running and hitting in terms of downhill tackling for the linebacker position is not is not quite as important in my estimation when I watch film as it was when I was playing, which was, 15 years ago now. Like, you needed to be a downhill, aggressive, towards the line of scrimmage player. Now it's like you got to operate in space. And so I do think that there's one of the reasons that the NFL is having a hard time with linebacker evaluation is because I don't think they've shifted totally from that traditional mold, right? They say, oh, look at this guy, Devin White. Look at him run downhill and attack the football, and look at his 40, but you don't see the coverage instincts with him, right? And it was the same thing with Patrick Queen for a while, right? He's a run and hit downhill guy, sideline to sideline, but you need to see the coverage backbone. And so that's why I think you see so many teams having so much success, quite frankly. Like Dallas is a really good example of this, of taking safeties, putting them at linebacker positions and having them cover and having those coverage instincts on the field. Because ultimately that's what you're looking for. You're looking for team speed, you're looking for coverage instincts and people that understand throwing windows, right? And I think that's what you get here with Jordan. So I don't know if it's an archetype necessarily. Like Fred Warner's the example because he's the best at the position. But I do think that there is that is the direction I think linebacker eval is going. Like, so one of the things I do every year in my draft prep is I look at big safeties and I'm like, which one of these guys could play linebacker potentially? And the other thing you do is you look at small kind of star linebackers and say, which one of these guys could go the other way? Because that's the type of player you're really looking for. And I think Jordan McGee, when you watch the film, he kind of fits that mold really, really well. And, like everyone talks about Junior Colson from Michigan, like didn't have to cover a lot. That's one thing I like about this pick a lot is there are some issues to his game, no doubt. That's why he's a 5th round pick. But in terms of upside, in terms of space play, I think he's a guy that I really liked and valued in the process. And so I'm really happy he's here as a Washington Commander because I do think his trajectory fits more with the direction the NFL is going at the position as opposed to, some of these other guys who are more traditional linebacker archetypes.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting because if you hunt speed and you hunt coverage instincts, like you're not necessarily looking for Fred Warner, but you're going to find guys that have some things that remind you of Fred Warner. That's the nature of it, right? You're not hunting the player, you're hunting the traits. And if you hunt the traits, there's obvious similarities. It's interesting. I just pulled up the Beast, Dane Brugler's draft guide. Of course, if you want to hear more about the Beast, check out our interview with Dane from before the draft. But Dane does such a great job of getting like the backstory on all these guys. So yeah. I will read from the Beast for all 3 of these picks. And I will also say like the stories of the guys that Adam picked here, that the Commanders picked here. There's some incredible stories. I don't know how familiar you are with Brandon Coleman's background, for instance.
Not really.
0-star recruit. Didn't play football until his junior year and of high school, was a basketball player, military kid, grew up overseas, gets there in Texas, figures out how to play football in 2 years, enough to get a JUCO look, and then ultimately transfers into TCU. And by 2022, 5 years after he starts playing football, he's starting at left tackle in the national championship game. Yeah. So like you have stories like that, which I mentioned not just because it's a cool story, but it's something I'm going to say about McGee and Luke McCaffrey, I think fits into this as well. but McGee was a two-way guy in high school, played quarterback, started wide receiver, played quarterback, was actually got major college interest. Indiana was interested in him as a quarterback, and he said, no, I want to play defense. That's the mentality of this kid. And, he ultimately winds up, at Temple and playing defense and all that kind of stuff. But it's not like he has that quarterback offensive background where you look at McCaffrey, again, quarterback until 2 years ago. Coleman, still within his first 10 years of playing football, when some of these kids have been playing football since they've been 5 years old. And to me, what that says is they've got so much more room to grow. They haven't dedicated full time to the thing they're going to be doing. And now they dedicate themselves to it at a professional level. And we talk about players that have an upward trajectory. Jaden Daniels falls into this as well.
Yeah.
What direction is the arrow pointing? And it seems like Adam Peters, one of his things that he identifies as a thing he wants is your arrow is pointing up and there is room to go up.
Yeah. Well, I think to your point, you look at Mike Sanders still switching positions, right?
Yeah.
In college, he's been playing DB. Obviously, he played DB in high school, but he's been playing DB at a high level for 2 years. And then Ben Sinnott was a 0-star recruit coming out, and has made himself this tremendous player. And I think when you look across the board, they're all like that. Those are their stories, right? It's guys that have earned every inch. I was listening to something. It was Daniel Jeremiah, Move the Sticks, and he said he had some interview time with Adam Peters before the draft, then was kind of able to release some of the information now. And he's like, one of the things I love about Jaden Daniels is nowhere in the process was it easy for him. He had to earn everything to get to this moment. And I think that, like you're alluding to, is applicable to all of these guys to a certain extent. Maybe not Johnny Newton, but no draft is perfect. I like good football players, not just their story I'm drafting.
Yeah. Oh, that guy didn't have to face enough adversity. He's just awesome the way he is. Let's not take him.
Right.
No.
But I do think I know for sure, 4 of the guys have had kind of really, really earned their way and clawed their way up to something pretty impressive in terms of play. So I think, again, it kind of fits a mold, fits a vision. And I think it informs something about their character too, which is, again, we've talked about that a lot. And when I'm building a team, I want guys of that ilk, guys that are going to get better. And I think if there's one thing that I learned from my time in the NFL, talent will only get you so far. The guys that are truly special are tremendous students and tremendous workers. And what this upward trajectory for these guys we're talking about shows me is that they understand that process. And that's a level of professionalism that I want to bet on, right? We talk about how most drafts don't hit. 50% hit rate is amazing. But I think if you look at the history of drafts, those guys who have those qualities are guys you can bet on. And I think it's just great that in this draft specifically, there's such a high composition of guys like that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, if you want the full edition of Take Command, including our breakdown on Dominique Hampton and the rest of the Commanders draft/undrafted free agent class, make sure you download Take Command when it hits your feed tomorrow morning, which it'll do automatically. It'll be right there on your phone if you just subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Also, a big, long conversation on draft philosophy when it comes to what the Falcons did with Michael Penix. No, I don't like it now. Yes, I still think it's indefensible. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, let's follow up on that linebacker discussion. Ant and I were talking before the show and wanted to talk, kind of bring that conversation to the air about where the linebacker room is this year and moving forward. Then Lynnell pops in. We'll see if he apparently he's very optimistic about the Commanders in 2024. So we'll see just how optimistic and if we have to rein him back in. Coming up at 5 o'clock here on the Team 980. Lynnell stops in with his optimism. Who is he? Coming up at 5 o'clock. Right now, though, here on the Hoffman Show, which, of course, is on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming on YouTube at the Team 980. We talk about the Commanders' linebacker situations. They add Jordan McGee in to a room that includes, we're not exactly sure. We know that Bobby Wagner's in there. We know that Jamin Davis is in there. And then we're like, hey, Jeremy Chin, are you coming to this meeting or are you going down the halls to the safeties? Dominique Hampton, sixth rounder, are you coming here? Did you stop by the weight room first? Or are you going to go down and be with the safeties? And this is kind of the fun part of this Dan Quinn, Joe Witt Jr. defense is they love these hybrid types of players. And, you know, Frankie Louvu's definitely in the room, but, like, he's also got to attend the pass rush meetings, and who knows where he could wind up on any given snap. And that's kind of the beauty of it. Now, of course, I think Commanders fans have been burned by the idea of position flex in the past, which is why I've liked to call it versatility under Dan Quinn. But it is an interesting room, Ant, because there's just not a lot at linebacker that's solidly linebacker once you get past this season. Now, Jamin Davis and Bobby Wagner could be excellent football players in 2024. Wagner's not what he used to be, but he's still really freaking good. And Jamin Davis, I think, has shown some flashes of being a very, very solid football player as he's grown into himself here entering year 4. So neither of those guys have money for 2025. You have McGee. You've got Louvu moving forward, but it's an interesting position at the middle of a defense with Dan Quinn that's always had pretty good linebackers in one form or another through all the different iterations and versions that he's had over the years.
Yeah, I think everything you just pointed out, especially about us not having any linebackers under contract aside from Frankie and Jordan next year in 2025. I think had I known this, going into the draft, I didn't really look at the linebacker room too much because, again, wide receiver, tackle, cornerback, those were of really important needs, I guess, for our team. So the linebacker room sort of kind of got overlooked. But now I'm thinking about it, it's more so dang, should we have address, possibly getting a linebacker like sooner, maybe in the 3rd round, or, I guess getting Jordan McGee in the 5th, somebody that you can sort of kind of allow to sit under Bobby Wagner, learn from Jamin, learn from Frankie, and then, develop that way. I think it's also a cool way of, going about building through the draft, as we all like to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's people have to keep in mind in general when we're talking about, did they fill this need, is you don't have you can't do everything at once, and you don't have unlimited draft picks, right? So you have to prioritize, and that also means you're going to have to, on those positions that you don't prioritize, potentially take some big upside swings. Because I think you'll be able to tell in practice this year if Jordan McGee's got a chance to be a starter for you next year. Or do you go into next year saying, all right, hey, we took that 3rd round swing on Brandon Coleman. Hopefully that works out. Now we don't have to address left tackle. And we're in a position where we can take a linebacker in the 1st or 2nd round, which most teams don't do. Because it also wasn't a good linebacker class.
Yeah.
But I think this is where Adam Peters is so good. And time will tell whether he's done it again like he did in San Francisco and frankly like he has in New England and Denver. Like he's got a track record here. So, but what makes Peters so good is he's able to identify where the game is going and what kind of players he needs. And like, I think that was really, really interesting. The reason I wanted to play that segment from Logan and or with Logan, and what I found so interesting about our conversation this morning was what he looks for in a linebacker has changed dramatically in the last 5, 10, 15 years, right? Like, remember when Devin White came out and people were like, is that dude a top 5 pick? Mm-hmm. Like, Devin White's not a top 5 linebacker in football and never has been. Nevertheless, a top 5 pick. And we wound up going, 10 or 11, something like that?
Yeah.
To the Bucs. But he is a run and hit linebacker, which still has some value. And like Jamin's the same way, right? But a guy like McGee shows an ability in coverage, which might go back to the fact that he played quarterback in high school, right? He played some offense. He's played some different positions, so he's had to see the field in different ways. But, you identify a guy like Fred Warner because you're like, oh, he's got a certain skill set. He runs really well. He may not be like the biggest hitter. McGee's certainly a hitter, and Warner will lay wood, if he gets the chance. But the thing that is maybe sticks out a little bit more on the player profile is like, oh, this dude's got a little something to him in coverage. And in the modern NFL, if you want to have a great difference-making linebacker, you tell me a guy who's got some coverage instincts and can run, and I tell you I can work with that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. Is like you look at Coleman and you're like, so wait, why exactly is this guy not seen as good as Patrick Paul? Like, we focused on Paul a lot during the pre-draft process because Logan really liked him. And I look at their prospect profiles now, and I don't think, it's hard to check your own bias because now we know what we know, and they took Coleman. But if you had told me about these two players before the draft, I probably feel like I just didn't get to Coleman at any point. Like, no one ever brought him up as a possibility, probably because a lot of people thought he was going to be a guard, so I didn't bother to double-click on him. But knowing what I know now, I'm like, I think I'd rather have Coleman. Like, you give me his competitiveness and kind of his football character and, the toughness that he's shown.
Athleticism.
And the fact, the athleticism, the fact that he played mostly tackle and is better at tackle, why is that better than or not better than Patrick Paul, who's inconsistent? He played only tackle, and he's a big man and he's very athletic, but he wasn't consistent. I'd rather have the consistency of a guy like Coleman, I think. I get the upside play with Patrick Paul, but let's not pretend like Coleman doesn't have room to grow either. And so I think that's the cool thing about the kind of the larger discussion of they have a tendency to find guys who have great character, competitiveness, have shown an ability to grow, and their arrow is pointing up, as opposed to having a question mark as their trajectory. But specific to linebacker, they have a specific set of traits they look for. McGee fits those traits. And so if in a year from now they decide, hey, Bobby, thanks, or Wagner wants to retire, or he wants to go chase a ring somewhere, whatever it is that happens after this first year, they drafted a guy who's going to get a shot versus I don't know, in 4 years, I hope he can be a reliable backup, but he's going to be a stud special teamer because he's fast and likes to rip people's faces off. And sometimes you draft like that. Sometimes you're like, we just need a special teams goon. Come on down. You're really fast and you like to hit people. And if we can turn you into a useful defensive player, great. And I think McGee can be a good special teamer straight up or straight off the bat, but there is like a definitive upside to him that I think is really intriguing. Who knows if he'll reach it? There's a reason he's a 5th-round pick, but we'll see. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Lynnell pops in next. I've heard he's got outsized optimism for the 2024 season. Let's see just how out over his skis he is next. Coming up at 5:30, Never Read the Comments. The segment where we read the comments. Right now, though, on a Thursday, my pleasure to welcome in. Nope, that's not where. Nope. Now I wish you were up. I had a one shot on. Little bit more that way. Nope. No, other way. There you go. Now Lynnell Willingham is center screen. If you're watching us on YouTube, which you can every day at the Team 980, of course, listen to us on the free Odyssey app, where you can also hear Lynnell tonight on Overtime on 106.7. The Fan. Have you recovered from, what do you guys call it, Throw Down Thursday?
I mean, how do you recover?
I don't know.
3 hours of trying to share oxygen with an endangered species.
Oh. I didn't know roosters were endangered.
I called him an industry plant. You're probably going to take exception to some of the things I had to say to him, because some may characterize you the same way.
Go on.
I mean, just the level of passion that he tried to rain on my parade, because I walked in here yesterday. This is when this started. And I said,
yes.
For a guy like me, if you're a part of the Youngest in Charge movement and you haven't gotten to bear witness to the greatness of this franchise, and it's some type of, fairy tale that we were once considered one of the pillar franchises in the NFL and in professional sports.
It's not a fairy tale. It's just history. At
this
point,
it feels like
it's not recent history.
It's not. So my whole thing is and I guess this is how we'll break the ice here. On May the 2nd, 2024, Lynnell Willingham is at the peak of his Commanders fandom. I've never been more optimistic. I've never been more excited. I've never had such honest glee. Because normally, I'm known for speaking to hyperbole every now and then. And sometimes it's very easy for me to buy in and for me to show the symptoms of my Ashburn syndrome, which JP Finley dubbed it.
Emphasis on a different syllable there.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Ashburn syndrome.
I can't even get myself back straight. But no, I just feel like, now that the quarterback's been selected, the draft class is in place, rookie mini camp get ready to open up next week, we have a pretty good idea as to what this roster is going to look like heading into training camp. And I'm liking what's on paper. I feel genuinely, and I'm not saying this facetiously, I feel like internally they're going to have their own expectations.
Uh-huh.
I expect them to compete for the division title this year. I expect for them to take a sizable jump forward, because they have done a complete 180 in terms of what the program now is made of. From the coaching staff to the players to the new leaders that we have here. And my optimism within the division in particular also has a hell of a lot to do with me being thoroughly unimpressed by what else is happening around the division.
Sure. So, as I feel like is usual with us, unlike when Russell's in this chair and you guys yell at each other for 3 hours, sometimes which I hear through multiple supposedly soundproof walls, I agree with a lot of your points and don't fully agree with your conclusion. And that's why I enjoy talking about this stuff with you, because I will defend you often on where people are like, Lynnell's just a hardo, whatever, blowhard, windbag. And I'm like, he sometimes comes to crazy ass conclusions, but don't think that this dude doesn't do his work.
Yes.
And to me, I think you having one, I'm not going to police people's feelings, but since you asked, or since you put it out there, and this would be a very boring segment if I didn't, I think your optimism to say, this is the best I have felt as a Commanders fan in my 20 whatever years it is for people that are of your generation. Now I sound like I'm 100 years old. Is well placed, because this is something that I've been saying in the 9 years that I've been in DC, is even if they could be good for a little while, 2015, not even counting 2020 when they won a division is good. They weren't good. But 2015, back half of the year, that was real. That was a good football team that caught its stride and had a chance going into the playoffs. And Kirk played an all-time poopsie game in 2015 against the Packers at home. But going into that, he he was a top 5 quarterback the second half of the 2015 season. Again, played like it doesn't mean he was, but like he was playing at that level. They had Deshaun, they had Pierre. Like their O-line was nasty. Their defense had some really solid players who were playing really well. So there's just a lot going right. They had a good mix of youth and experience that year as well. So there's just a lot of stuff that was going really well. And then obviously a lot of it falls apart. Jordan Reed's injuries killed them because they had an entire offense built around him. And in 2015, he was healthy. And in 2016, 17, 18, he was not. And we know what happened. Yeah. But now that cap of Snyder's not good and Snyder is going to hire bad people, not just bad people as humans, but bad at their jobs. Yeah. And so the only way to be successful is to be lucky. I think that is correct. What I would push back on in terms of the conclusion is what that means for 2024. Because I do think this is like an investment strategy, which is hilarious as I'm in the middle of a 2-hour podcast by Mitchell, or interview with Mitchell Rails on the art of investing. And he talks about how he doesn't look quarter by quarter like most people do who own businesses. He is a 3, 5, 10-year, 30-year, like, can I find someone who 20 to 30 years from now is going to be making me a ton of money? Obviously, football moves at a different pace, but there is a long-termism to this that is going to take some level of time. And I do think, in part, we overestimate how bad, like, Dallas is. And I'm trying not to fall into this trap because, like, should they have addressed running back in the draft? Probably, but they won 12 games last year. And if I'm them, I'm going, what am I supposed to change besides my playoff performance? We won 12 games. And so I think that there is, again, I'm not here to poo-poo your optimism. I certainly think it's warranted, but I do think it's going to take longer than 1 year to flip this team to where they are legitimately competing for a division, unless they catch a couple breaks, including, by the way, their number 2 overall pick having an unprecedented season out if you take out what C.J. Stroud did last year.
And I think that's where the majority of my optimism lies. I really do think in 2012, early on in that season, specifically the very first game of the season, I feel like they caught the rest of the National Football League by surprise because there was this unknown element of what they were doing offensively. Not that Cliff is going to come in here and reinvent the wheel of what NFL offense is, but after spending time in college for a second time in his career, being the offensive coordinator only and being game plan specific and not having to worry about some of the other ancillary things that an OC has to deal with, I think the sum of the parts, including the quarterback, give them an opportunity to be really dynamic on offense. And I'm of the belief that last year was an anomaly on defense, and they are nowhere near the worst defense in football, which they were most of last year. And I think this improved coaching staff, I think the improved talent, all of that manifests itself together and works in conjunction to make this a team that is going to be a fringe playoff team. Now, when I say compete for the division, this year,
you don't have him as the favorite, right?
No,
like,
no.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's legit, right?
I think they're battling for 2.
Before people jump on you, is like, does compete mean like you're picking them, or does compete mean like we're 12 weeks in and mathematically they've got more than a shot? Because I can definitely see that.
Where I'm going.
Because I do think they'll float around 500 most of the year, and until a team, until we get to those division games, the way the NFL schedules it now at the end of the year, that means you've got a shot. Like, we could be sitting here in December being like, all right, their next 4 games are all against the division. They're 2 games behind Philly. Like, if they beat Philly once and then Dallas beats Philly twice, like, the Commanders are right there. Like, that seems feasible to me.
And that is, where I'm at. I think it's going to be one of those years where everyone beats up on each other in the division. I think the schedule gets a little bit stiffer when you got to take on the NFC North, who I think is starting to quickly become one of the better divisions in football. You got the NFC South on your plate, which should be, that gives me optimism. Maybe Washington can go 4-0 in the NFC South. Who knows? But I don't believe there's this sizable gap from this program and what Dallas has built, from this program and what Philadelphia has. Now, I understand this is the beginning of it. We haven't even had rookie minicamp. My opinion will change as OTAs pass, as minicamp passes. Right now, though, post-draft, based on just what they are on paper heading into camp. And they can make sizable changes before camp. I feel like they're in a position where they will be playing competitive football, meaningful football, for the entire 18-week season. That's where I'm at right now.
I don't think that's outrageous. 301-230-0980. How optimistic are you for 2024? More, less, or around the same as Lynnell? I don't know. For what this was sold as, I was expecting to have to be like, whoa, buddy, pump the brakes. But
Well,
I think of those three categories, Lynnell, I'm probably in the category with you. I'm below you in the category. I don't have as nice of a house or as big of a house on the block, but I think we're in the same neighborhood. 301-230-0980. Are you right there with us? Take your calls next. By any chance, Lynnell, were you listening to the show on your way home yesterday?
Well, I had a tizzy on the Metro, so
Oh,
I wasn't able to because of the Metro.
oh, hate that.
But
I just because Ant, you weren't here yesterday either, but we had a caller earlier in the week, Marvin in Landover.
okay,
And
I know.
Marvin has some takes that nobody else likes. It's pretty funny. And so we of course cut his call out and put it up on YouTube. And then yesterday, unprompted, he called back, and we had another discussion. And let's just say the comments on the two of those calls are going to be heavily featured in today's Never Read the Comments coming up at 5:30. Highly recommend folks check that out. If you haven't heard the calls with Marvin, it's worth checking out on YouTube at Craig Hoffman. That's all I'm going to say.
Are you going to make Marvin famous?
Marvin made himself famous. I'm just a vehicle.
There we go.
I'm just being used here. How optimistic are you about the Commanders? 301-230-0980. Lynnell, summation of position is?
Very, very optimistic. And I'm not cautiously optimistic. I just think, and when I talk about my optimism for this year, it's not really just football-centric.
Yeah.
Listening to Josh Harris talk during the media scrum on Friday, he's just such a breath of fresh air compared to what Daniel Snyder was. He's already spoken to the media more times in a calendar year than Dan has his entire tenure here.
100%.
And just to hear how personal he takes this job and how much it means to him, I'm a sucker for it. It's the best way that I can put it. And it's call it what it is, because he may end up being full of crap. I doubt it, based off the track record of his other professional sports teams. But
yeah,
he just oozes passion, and I think some people.
But he also oozes competence. Like, that's the thing. Is like, you listen to him, you listen to Rails, like you listen to Ein, and it's very clear. Or you listen to Magic talk about team building.
Yes.
Like, as funny as Magic's Twitter account is, like, you listen to Magic not on Twitter, and you're like, oh, yeah,
he gets it.
Yeah, this guy's really smart. And so I think that competence, which, by the way, like, listen to Adam Peters talk. Listen to, Snyder to Harris is one thing. Listen, Peters to Bruce Allen. Oh my God,
night and day. But then it's just the idea that, and this is why I keep talking for the younger sector of the fan base. We've had ownership, head coach, GM on the same page, but they weren't competent folks. Vinny Serrato was an agent that was tasked with running the football operation. Bruce Allen has never had control in an organization. Yeah, I know he may have won Executive of the Year in Oakland. It was John Gruden. Everyone with a football brain knows that. So just the stark contrast of having real, as you put it, competent people, not only just competent, highly sought after. Adam Peters was the most sought after talent evaluator in the entire process, and he chose this organization. That alone, I don't care what quarterback they picked. That's why I coined my phrase, we're at the mercy of the evaluator. We begged for this.
Yeah.
We begged for this. Let him do his job. So you all out there that have your panties in a wad and are in a tizzy over the tackle situation, don't go back and look at why the tackles struggled last year. Go back and look at why the entire offense struggled last year. And Chris Russell gets on my case for this. I happen to think last year's issues were more centered in the coaching staff not putting guys in the best position to succeed than all of a sudden the players just stinking. Defensively, the year before, 2022, this was a hands down universal. We all would have said it was a top 10 defense.
Well, yeah, they were by every metric.
And
I also like to point out that any other types of underwear that are also in a wad also should not be there over tackles.
Boxers, Hanes,
briefs,
compression shorts.
Yeah.
Don't get your undergarments in a wad.
Yeah, there's
nothing to be upset about.
Thought that was worth pointing out.
Yes, and I really do feel like no matter how this year finishes, no matter what Jaden ends up turning into, the fact that they have gone through the process the right way, it gives me all the relief in the world that this is something that I can get behind. And I'm not some cheerleader for the team, but I said it earlier. This is the time to go buy your jerseys. This is the time to, if you want to get back in and get season tickets, this is it. The time is now. I genuinely feel that.
No, 100%. There's like a competent process, and you look at like how they have a vision of, and you're like, oh, that sounds
and they
really
tell
smart.
it to us. It's one thing to have a vision, and then they play this role of we're way smarter than you, so we're not gonna, tip our hand. They've been very forthcoming about how they've gone about their process.
Yeah.
Even though,
what they look for, and it's not, and then they follow through on it. Because, it's not that hard to say the right stuff. It's hard to do it. And, Adam Peters does it. Let's go to Aaron. Aaron, thanks for calling. Get us started. How optimistic are you for 2024 as you join me and Lynnell here on the Hoffman Show?
What's up, Aaron?
What's going on, fellas?
How optimistic are you? Like, there's a record, just your level of excitement, 1 to 10. What you got?
Look, right. So I was born in '91. I'll be 33 this year, right? 2012, and I don't want to dwell too much on 2012 on RG3, but that was like the best thing I ever seen as far as being a Skins sports fan.
Yeah.
DC sports fan at that. This year, I'm as optimistic. I'm more optimistic than I was, the off season when we drafted RG3. Because, like, take Jaden Daniels out the picture, whatever quarterback we would have got, or if we had to stick with Marcus Mariota, or if we had Sam Howell, it doesn't matter. All the things that we did before that in the last couple of years with the new ownership, the coaching changes, we took most of Dallas's defense from their coaches to some of their players, and they were a top defense for the last couple of years. So we're not even talking about, our quarterback and the number 2 overall pick. We're talking about everything they did around that, and even after that, the late round picks. Outside of Alfred Morris, who was unexpected in 2012, we didn't expect anybody but RG3 to bring us something different. This year is way more than Jaden Daniels. I don't think anybody else in the division has done anything spectacular to take them above what they were beforehand. And we just I think we got the element of surprise in so many different areas, and I just think winning the division is not far-fetched. I think 10 or more wins is definitely,
Well,
possible.
that's where I get, Aaron, thanks for the call. Like, I just remind folks.
Specific, yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Like, 10 wins is really hard. And, like, obviously we know how hard 12 wins is. This team hasn't done it since, 91? Or whatever it was, 93, 90, whatever, last Super Bowl year. They won 12. That's the last time they did it. So, like, getting double-digit wins is really hard. It's easier now because there's an extra week. But I do think that, like, just consistently competing week to week is not an unreasonable expectation. And by the end of last year, like, that would have been a miracle to just be competitive in any given week. And I think there's a clip or a question that Ryan Clark asked Dan Orlovsky on the Pivot. When Orlovsky was on. I don't know if you saw this clip, Lynnell, when, and basically Dan was like, forget giving a young quarterback a running game and an O-line and all this kind of stuff. Give him a defense. Like, you want to know what makes a quarterback's life easier as a young player? Hey, dude, go score 14 and we have a chance. Versus, hey, man, I need 28 today.
Yeah.
Like, it changes everything about how you play. The pressure you feel, the risk mitigation. Decision-making, all of that. Like, you're just okay. You're okay. Like, hey, every drive ends in a kick. If we punt, we punt. But we're not turning the football over. We're not trying anything crazy. Like, it just changes everything. And I do think this season, while they don't have the pass rushers, I think, to be elite, I think they have the coaching and the players to be very solid. And if they can generate turnovers at the level that Dallas traditionally has and Quinn's defenses have and Witt's defenses have, now we're talking about a defense that can be like pushing top 10, nevertheless floating somewhere around 15. I do think you need the Parsons, the Von Miller, the whatever, like pick your best defenses of the last decade, this last half decade, especially when this league has become so pass happy, and they don't have that. So that's going to be hard to push like top 5 eliteness, but is like being the 12th best defense in the league unreasonable? And if you pair that with a very good running game, like, does that create competitive late game football week in, week out? Yeah, it does. And that's a formula that they can follow. And I think that they actually will.
That's the big hope and question mark. We play the promo every week here on Team 980 every day. Logan saying, 2021, they ran the ball. Are they going to stick with it? We had this predict what this offense is going to be. And I agree with Chris Russell with what he said. I think we're going to see, a lot more 11, 12, 13. I don't think they're going to have to go 3 wide, 4 wide every play. One, I don't think they have the depth in the receiver room to do that.
Like, Cliff used a lot of 12 his last year in Arizona. And, like, that's why Sinnett's here. And, like, not to get too deep into it because we're up against the clock, but, like, if you want to know more about why Sinnett's so important, go listen and Take Command from earlier in the week when we talked about it. Shameless plug, but a natural one. Because the very simple premise is that when he's on the field, you can be in 12, you can be in 21. Like, you can split him out, and you're kind of in 11. Like, but the defense is going to have to match in base, and that gives you options. And like that kind of flexibility offensively very clearly is something that Cliff is ready to embark on in the same way that Kyle has. And in his last year in Arizona, his last 2 years in Arizona, there was a lot of Kyle Shanahan-y looking stuff in that Cliff Kingsbury offense. And I do think that's something that we're going to look at this year. All right, thanks for the call there. Thanks for a couple other. We're going to have to, unfortunately, keep it moving. Lynnell's got to go get ready for overtime, and we have never read the comments to get to, but appreciate everyone who chimed in. Lynnell, great stuff, dude. What you got coming up on overtime tonight?
10-7.
10-7.
10-7. Early pre-rookie mini camp prediction.
Okay.
10-7.
Okay, and then overtime tonight?
Overtime, we got a lot of draft talk. We got Emory Hunt from CBS Sports HQ, and then we got Trevor Sikkema joining us at 8:15
Oh, nice.
to talk draft.
Trevor's going to do a full Take a Man with us next week, so looking forward to going super deep with him. All right, so that's tonight over on 106.7 The Fan. When we get back, never read the comments here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and we're streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Damon Amendolara joins the show coming up at 6 p.m. But right now, just after 5:30 on a Thursday, we're going to throw caution to the wind. I have been better, Ant, by the way, about reading the comments because I was getting a little too online. It wasn't good for me. I deleted the app where I read all the comments like habitually from my phone. So, but I still read them. Now it's on my time as opposed to doing it impulsively. So it's good for me. It's good for the show. It's still good for all of you because we're still getting the interaction. But I am following my own advice. We don't never read the comments. We just read them strategically. But there's still a reason why we call this segment Never Read the Comments.
We tried to warn them. They didn't listen.
Yeah!
Every week, the Hoffman Show goes into the belly of the beast.
We read those comments, baby.
Never read the comments.
All right, let's do it. Let's go inside the comments section where we find all kinds of shenanigans. So much. And actually, Ant, I think a career high percentage of comments I actually pulled from the Team 980's comment page. Our YouTube page is continuing to gain steam at the Team 980, where you can watch our show live, of course, every single day, all 3 hours. We also pull comments from my page at Craig Hoffman. We had Standig on yesterday, and this comment, I think, was really good on that video / that interview from Jacob Kemper, Jacob Kemper, 4086. Ben just summed up what I've been trying to figure out. The Monday after this draft is like a wake-up. And Ben talked about how he feels like since he started covering the team, really, but certainly since all the ownership stuff came down in July of 2020, so not even the ownership stuff, like the scandals and the post stories and all that kind of stuff, through the ownership change, through the sale, through the season, through the draft process, how he just was like, oh, I woke up Monday and was like, oh, I don't have that much to do. Just kind of a cool draft recap. And so Jacob says, the Monday after this draft is like a wake up. We've been not only bad, but the actual butt of every good NFL joke. We were the joke in the NFL in every way. Waking up on Monday was the first day I felt like a football fan who matters since about 1994. Snyder came 5 years later, but this started when Gibbs left and Jack, as in Jack Kent Cook, passed away. My son was born in 96. He has never felt this feeling we all feel right now. Players might not work out, whatever, it's football. But if things don't work, it won't be a joke. It will be football. That's 100% correct. It's pretty wild, and just to think, like, we haven't had a day since we started the show where it didn't feel like there was something looming. Like, we started the show in June of 22. We're coming up on 2 years, a month and a half from now, or 2 months from now. And we were in the middle of all that stuff. You know, one of the big topics we had is like the NFL needs to move on Snyder because this is insane. We had the hearings, the congressional stuff. Our first summer was, remember why this is on the board? Where'd it go?
I'm on a boat.
Yeah, where'd it go? Did I take it off?
Oh, no.
I think I might have taken it off because we don't need it anymore.
I guess so.
I think we took it off and we put on there. But we used to have the I'm on a boat song because Dan Snyder was on his boat avoiding a congressional subpoena. That was a story that we covered. And so it's truly wild. What we've been through, and just to wake up all of a sudden, and the pressure of the number 2 pick is like an enormous football story. And so none of that. All of a sudden the pick comes in. It's the guy that kind of most people agree was the right pick. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, cool. Okay, when's rookie minicamp? Cool. I thought it was really interesting, and it feels that way. And so for us, like, in a way, it's harder for us as the daily talk show world because we're like, oh, what are we going to talk about? And it's like, I don't know, the NBA playoffs? You got space to. We can talk about the Wizards head coaching search and draft. Like, we got space to. See what else we can talk about. But it's not, it's funny because throughout this process, Don Van Natta has become a great friend. And I'm always thrilled that we have him on the show. But there's very little chance it feels like that Don Van Natta is going to ruin my day or make my day, depending on the day and the story and how much else we had on the rundown and how hard we worked on it before we had to throw the whole thing out. It's great. It's truly great. Let's see. We talked about, obviously, the draft earlier in the week. Mal CR99 says, ideally, I would have liked to find more on the O-line, but with such a lot of holes to fill, I'm not too upset. The value was just not there to trade back up to get one earlier, and the tackles a bit higher all seem to have the odd question mark over them. I talked about this earlier in the show, Ann. I'm curious, as you've heard from Brandon Coleman and heard about Brandon Coleman this week, like, are you with me that, like, I'd rather have Brandon Coleman than some of the guys that, we were talking about pre-draft? Because if you tell me you got a guy who played tackle at a really high level, including for a national championship, participant team in 2022, he's got crazy athleticism. His, body comp in terms of size, wingspan, all that kind of stuff is Trent Williams. So he's clearly got the size to play tackle. His raw athletic score is, through the roof. And the only reason he played guard was because TCU had a bunch of other injuries and they needed him to, and he stepped up for his team and battled through a bunch of injuries to tough it out this year and figured out a way to give up, I think maybe he gave up a sack. Maybe give up 0 sacks this year. I just don't. Sounds like a great prospect to me.
Yeah, I mean, to only give up 3 sacks in your career at TCU is pretty good, but also just considering where we got him at 67 after having traded back to acquire 2 more players. I think you combine all of that. I think this is sort of kind of a steal, and that's not even including everything that you just mentioned about his raw athletic score and his footwork, his athleticism, his aggression, things of that nature.
Right, and that's the thing. So it's not just would you rather have him or would you rather have Patrick Paul or...
And Patrick Paul, isn't he a project to an extent?
Yeah,
he
or,
still have to be coached up?
Kingsley Suamataia, all those guys are. Roger Rosengarten has a lower ceiling. Yeah. They're not that different as prospects. So would you rather have one of those guys? Do you feel so strong in your conviction about one of those guys that you'd rather have them than Mike Sainristil, Ben Sinnott, and Brandon Coleman?
Exactly.
No freaking way. And that's something that I talked about with a bunch of people kind of post-draft is, how could they let the Eagles go up and get Cooper DeJean? What are the chances that Cooper DeJean is more impactful to the Eagles than Ben Sinnott and Mike Sainristil for the Commanders? Yep. And Brandon Coleman? Maybe Coleman wasn't a part of that deal. There was another player that ultimately, they probably couldn't have gotten somewhere else in the draft. But that's the thing is, you wind up with multiple good players. And, the same thing is true to take it away from Washington, Philly and try to take some of the emotion out of it. There was a piece in The Athletic this morning from Mike Sando where he talked to a bunch of executives about every team's draft in the NFC. And they talked about the Cardinals. And one exec was like, I'd rather probably just have Will Anderson than the 5 players that the Cardinals got basically in exchange. And yeah, the trade didn't work out quite as much as we thought it would for Arizona because Houston was way better than we thought they would be this year. But I was talking about that quote with Logan this morning, and he's like, I wouldn't. He's like, and I love Will Anderson. But the chances that outside of a quarterback, obviously no one cares what Kansas City gave up for Mahomes. It wasn't enough. It's not possible to give up enough, right? If it's quarterback and the dude hits, different conversation. But outside of that, the chances that a single player can be as good value-wise and make up for multiple other players who are even 90% as good, it's just unlikely because of the way positional value works. So I'm I'm quite excited about what they did, obviously, and from a process standpoint, very impressed. Tiger0366, who, and I felt like I had to read Tiger's comments because it was short. I'm not sure it totally makes sense. I might need some help here translating this out, but he or she, whoever Tiger is, typically leaves like multiple paragraphs that are kind of nonsensical. But loyal watcher to the video. So Tiger, thanks so much for watching and commenting. Even though I definitely don't read your comments all the way through because they are nonsensical novels, except for this one. All right, so I would like you to answer the question. Is there a free agent offensive tackle that you would outbid all others for? It seems as though instead we get about 10 channels saying we ought to do this for Ayuk, who is not really a need. Or are we really going to develop the OTs we have picked up, and will they be dominant? Or is OT a target for 2025? You know what that kind of sounds like, Ant? And I'm not trying to be like mean-spirited about this. It almost sounds like someone who maybe watches our videos translated, used like a Google translator, and the translator doesn't quite go back and forth.
Oh.
And if that's the case, I really appreciate all that effort.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that to be mean. It's just like there seems to be a lot going on there. But the reason I picked it is because I do think that the 2025 part is a good question. So one, is there an offensive tackle that you would outbid all others for? I'm guessing you mean, like, would you just pay a bunch of money in free agency? No. And especially, we were talking about this before the show, right? I want Coleman getting every snap possible in minicamp, especially in OTAs. If he in minicamp struggles so mightily that you know he's not starting in 2024, and you might have to kick him inside to guard, and it's just like obvious, like, oh, this dude can't play tackle in the NFL, which would be a surprise to know that definitively that quickly, considering what he was in college. Then maybe you go sign someone, and whether it's Bakhtiari or Andres Pete or DJ Humphries is still available, who played for Cliff, but he's coming off an ACL, so Corn Lucas would be your starter probably through like week 9 or 10 at the very least. You could do any of those things. But I would rather give Lucas and Coleman the snaps, knowing that Bakhtiari and Pete and all these guys are still out there. And if I need to sign one of them at the end of training camp or in the middle of training camp because the preseason games are not going well, then I can just sign them then. And I will have gotten my young players more reps, especially my young guy in Coleman. Corn, obviously a veteran. So that would be part one of that question. But it also is important to remember that you can't fix everything in 1 year. And so 2025, yeah, I would address tackle in 2025. And I'm either going to address left tackle because Coleman didn't work out, and I don't think he can be my guy, or I'm in a place where I have an elite tackle potentially on the board, or I'm probably addressing Wiley's spot in 2025. I just think play calling can help Wiley so much. He was just so overexposed last year. Like, Andrew Wiley is a perfectly average NFL tackle. You can definitely upgrade, but you're not dead in the water unless you drop your quarterback back at an unprecedented rate, and that quarterback has a propensity to hold the football, a la the 2023 Washington Commanders. And by the way, Wiley's a plus in the run game. So run the football a little bit more, survive the year, let Jaden come along slowly, rely on your run game and your defense to be competitive. Know that you can use the play action and also some, like, you know, kind of one read type of go ball, slot fades, get some easy stuff based off of formation for him that also makes the blocking a whole lot easier. And then if you can upgrade on Wiley in 2025 and or figure out more of a franchise left tackle type in 2025, yes, I would do that. So hopefully Tiger 0366, that answers your question.
Did he also mention Ayuk?
Oh, yeah. It seems, well, everyone, he says, we got 10 channels, talking about YouTube channels, saying we ought to do this or that for Ayuk, who is not really a need.
Okay.
Yeah, so I tend to agree that the Ayuk trade would be a mistake. I just think it's too much invested in one position. It's a bad resource management. But I'm also not anti-Ayuk because he would help their receiving core. Because he could be your X, move Terry to Z, and then John in the slot, or Terry's got some flexibility. Like, you could do a lot of different stuff. I mean, Ayuk can play out of the slot. And he's also best friends with Jaden Daniels. So, like, if you want to do that for your quarterback and get him his literal best friend, like, I'm not anti. But I definitely wouldn't want to give up what San Francisco wants. and I guarantee you I know that Adam Peters knows what San Francisco wants for that. Last but not least, and our guy Marvin.
Oh my gosh. Did
Lots-
he leave a comment?
No,
Okay.
just people commenting on
the-
his calls.
Okay, got you.
Multiple. So if you missed it earlier this week, Marvin from Landover called in, and he gave the Commanders a D- because he didn't like the Brandon Coleman pick and thought they should have taken a tackle higher, or traded back up into the first round. We had a good, spirited but good discussion about why Adam Peters, I think, operated in the way that he did, operating from a certain character bar, operating from a certain positional type of bar, player, schematic, and how all of a sudden some of the guys that he may have wanted, Marvin may have wanted, don't exactly fit with what Washington wants to do. And it didn't go great for Marvin in the comments the first time through. And then he called back. And yesterday, Ant, we learned that Marvin is a teacher, a math teacher, who doesn't really understand sample sizes, because he did say he tried to tell me, someone who was on the beat covering the team in the 2015 to 2020 range, that I don't remember our offensive line being that good. He's like, I don't know, maybe they were solid, but like I don't remember them being a top 10 line, which I hit him with a Chris Berman, I know, because I was there. Yeah, I hit him with that. And then I was like, Trent Williams, and he was like, well, I remember Trent getting beat on a 3rd and 8 and like pulled out one snap from one game in like 2016. At which point I was like, Marvin, what do you teach? And he said math. And I said, have you gotten to the lesson on sample sizes yet? As if one dude can't have a Hall of Famer never had a bad snap. Wild. So Marvin's big point was they have to do more to protect Jaden Daniels. And I thought this quote, or this comment from Jordan X. Williams was amazing. He goes, so Bengals should have never taken Burrow because they haven't been able to protect him. Got it. I wish I had thought of that one myself. That really takes the air out of the balloon. Just a... Right. Yeah, they definitely should not have taken Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. Terrible idea. Call Me Aurelius says, Marvin sounds like the person in fantasy leagues who takes a kicker in the 3rd round.
Oh, my gosh.
JC Captain Chaos, I feel sorry for Marvin's students. I do, because we also talked about his grading rubric.
Really?
Yeah, because he was like,
gosh.
I was like, one thing being wrong seems pretty harsh, because he was like, I love every pick but this one. And by the way, he thinks he scouts offensive linemen better than Adam Peters, which is another part of Marvin's absolute hilarity.
Did he give the draft a D- to say he loves every pick?
Yeah, and I was like, dang, how do you grade your students? And so JC Captain Chaos said he feels bad for Marvin's students. There was a funny moment where I taught him Kingsley Suamatia's life story and why he might not have been on Washington's board. That seemed to hit Walter. He goes, Hoffman schooled him, because that really stunned. I used that one twice this week. We had Kevin earlier in the week. I meant to put that call up on YouTube too. Cut that one out, because we had a caller, Kevin, who did seem to realize mid-call that he was not is not a general manager. He's like, well, I'm not a GM. And I was like, yeah, believe it or not, I know. I enjoy the back and forth. It's fun.
Good calls, man.
But yeah. So that's never read the comments. You can leave yours, but just know other people are gonna leave theirs too. On YouTube at Greg Hoffman. I almost gave the phone number. That's not where you leave a comment. You can call the show, but it's not where you leave a comment. At Greg Hoffman, at the Team 980 on all our on-demand content. Really, really fun to go back and forth with everybody. And I'm glad y'all had as much fun with Marvin as I did. When we get back, Damon Amendolara on the NBA playoffs. How screwed are the Suns moving forward as they've been eliminated from said playoffs? And a few thoughts on the Michael Penix pick to Atlanta as well. Our guy DA from SiriusXM Mad Dog Radio joins us next on The Hoffman Show. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And it's our pleasure to welcome back to the show my good friend Damon Amendolara, of course, host of the DA Show with Babchick on SiriusXM Mad Dog Radio, and watch DA on the internet, specifically YouTube. You should check him out there. DA, what's up?
Not much, Hoff. How we doing?
Doing well. I'm like, now, how does it go for you on the national level? Because I guess you got NBA playoffs. Like, there's anything that's a big story in sports is a big story for you. We've been so hyper-focused on the Commanders draft and specifically on the number 2 pick here. I feel like I've come out of a wormhole the last 4 days.
Yeah, we've fully transitioned from NFL draft into 100%, maybe not 100%, but the majority of the talk now is definitely NBA playoffs and specifically this Knicks and Sixers series. I try not to be too New York-centric, even though I'm from New York and the studios are in New York and our crew is largely New Yorkers. But I think that this series has a lot of intrigue and interest from just a sheer basketball storyline and theater perspective. So we've done a lot of the Sixers and the Knicks, but also LeBron's, next step, the Lakers elimination, the Suns disaster, and a couple of other NBA things that we've kind of transitioned into after the draft.
So the Knicks-Sixers series is wild because it should be over, and the Knicks are still up 3-2, but it feels like they're the team on the brink all of a sudden. Yet also the Sixers do, in part because they've got this weird thing where Josh Harris, of course the Commanders owner as well as the Sixers owner, and some of his partners are buying tickets to their own game to give away to Philly people because they had way too many New York people there. It just seems like a series where both teams are kind of losing in a weird way, which also kind of mirrored the play on the floor late in that game the other night. Way too many turnovers for like a high-level playoff basketball game. But like, where are you at on the series and kind of where these two teams are on a bigger picture kind of trajectory of their championship pursuits as well?
Well, I don't think either team can win a championship. And I think that Knicks fever here in New York has gripped the city simply because the Knicks have not been this good in a decade when Carmelo at his peak won 50 games. They have not won 50 games since then, which was the 2013-2014 season, I believe. But then also, there has never really been a true belief that the Knicks could win a championship since the 90s. So you got 25 years. Now, do some delusional Knicks fans believe they could win a title? Probably. But this is just more the fact that, oh my God, they're not an embarrassment, and boy, is this fun. Because really, New York used to be like this all the time. In the 90s, the Knicks would have a deep run, the Rangers would have a deep run, but the Rangers have held up their end of the bargain, the Knicks have not. So from that standpoint, there's so much juice in this city. Everyone's wearing Knicks stuff. Everyone's talking Knicks. I mean, the hallways of everywhere that you go to, grocery stores, gas stations, everyone's talking Knicks. The second part is every single one of these games has been an epic game in some way, shape, or fashion, and we're only 5 games into the series. You have the Game 2, which is arguably the greatest Knicks comeback at home in playoff history, down 5 with 30 seconds to play. You have Game 3, in which Joel Embiid goes for 50 freaking points. You have Game 4, where the Knicks steal a Game 4 on the road. Joel Embiid's hearing chants that he sucks in his own home floor, and the whole thing is, oh my God, Knicks fans, the heathens from New York have come down and taken over the place. They're barbarians. To then Game 5, and perhaps the greatest choke in Knicks playoff history, at least close to the Reggie Miller one from back in the 90s, what happened in Game 5. And now we have a Game 6 in Philly where the Sixers owners are so worried, as you said, that Knicks fans are going to take over. They've got to buy their own tickets to distribute to their own fans. So there's so much baked into this, and I'm not sure it's great basketball, but it's chaotic, crazy swing of emotion basketball, and every game has something.
No, I think that's correct. Like, it's a lot of it's terrible. Like the end of Game 5, there are just some bad, like the one play that comes to mind, obviously, like the Brunson turnover late's the obvious, like, sloppy one. He gets caught in the air. Every youth coach is on their couch yelling at the TV. That's why you don't try to jump and pass, as if the rules that apply to their 7-year-olds also apply to NBA players. But you also have like a play where Joel drives it and Mitchell Robinson has like kind of a nice strip. But if you're Joel Embiid, you got to be better there as a MVP caliber player. Forget MVP caliber, as an MVP player, like you've got to be better there. But the chaos, and it just feels very like Eastern Conference 90s-y familiar basketball, even if the quality of said basketball isn't high. And like in a way, it's the same thing that makes March Madness great in the early rounds. We're like, this isn't the best basketball we're going to see over the next month, but it is highly entertaining, highly competitive. And the one thing that I really appreciate, especially about this Knicks team, is they play hard as hell. Like Tom Thibodeau has always been known for someone as a coach who pushes his guys, sometimes to the detriment because they're worn out by this point in the year. But that Knicks team plays so freaking hard, DA, and I think that's probably why the city reacts on some level, why they do to that team.
Definitely. That's part of it. And game 2 was the perfect example of that they never gave up. And all of these guys, greater than the sum of their parts, because somehow together they play really good basketball, but individually, none of these guys are stars outside of Jalen Brunson. And somehow Jalen Brunson has gone from a guy that even the Mavs wouldn't extend to be Luka's number 2 to a guy that can drop, point totals that rival Patrick Ewing and Bernard King Knicks playoff scoring records. It's crazy that he, of all people, is able to do that. And then the Joel Embiid thing is nuts because the guy's got a case of Bell's palsy right now. Half of his face is seemingly paralyzed for the next couple of months. He's just got blurry vision. He's basically on one good knee. So there is this very kind of like melodramatic, almost emo type of vibe to the whole thing. Are they villains? Are they heroes? Are they losers? Are they winners? Both teams are playing these roles constantly, and it's impossible to look away. And I think why it feels so 90s-ish is, as you said, it's not the most brilliant basketball, but also there were series specifically that the Knicks played in that decade that felt very life or death. That if they lost this series, your life was over, and their life was over, and everything had to end. And those games against the Bulls, those games against the Heat had that, and I don't think it's felt that way for 25 years until this playoff series.
Yeah, which is interesting because it feels like the Sixers are more in that boat. The Knicks don't have Julius Randle in the series, which automatically gives them a bit of an out. But as we talked to Howard Beck about yesterday, the Sixers are actually in a really, really good cap position. Like this in a way can be the down like middle year, the nadir for the Sixers during the Embiid era that ramps back up next year because of some of the flexibility they have. But also the reason it feels that way is because Tyrese Maxey, or the reason that is true is because Tyrese Maxey seems to be good enough to be the second best player on one of the best teams in the league. He is the breakout star of this series. If he didn't, we don't consider him having broken out last year in the playoffs. What do you make of what Maxey's been able to do as he's had to kind of carry a banged up Joel and a sick Joel along, and also especially doing it in the Garden? Because I feel like if you put that dude on the Knicks, like he's a cult hero instantly. And the Sixers fans aren't even showing up for these games.
I think that's a really interesting indicator of also this pressure cooker that the series has become, that the Sixers are almost villains in their own city because they've been such underachievers, unable to get through the second round. And this feels like more of the same, that they'll run into this wall of the Knicks and they'll have to go home early and yet another busted season. And we hear from a lot of Sixers fans and Philly fans on our show that they don't like this team, that it's not worth their emotional investment. And maybe to your point, it's a bridge year, it's a down year, or it's the end of something. And the fact that even Tyrese Maxey, who should be a cult hero in Philadelphia, can't quite rally the troops tells you how sour the city is on the Sixers. It's funny that you could take a story like Sixers ownership buying 2,000 tickets and spin that as a positive. Oh my goodness, look what they're doing in the community. They want to make sure Knicks fans don't show up. That's all well, fine, and good. But the underlying aspect is there are 2,000 available tickets to buy. The idea that James Dolan, who would never do this because he's not magnanimous, but could you imagine James Dolan having 2,000 tickets to buy that he could give away? There's not 200 tickets he could buy. There's not 20 tickets he could buy to a Game 6 of the NBA playoffs. Certainly not one with this much animosity between the two. There's not a ticket to be had for the Knicks, but in Philly, you could just grab an extra 2,000. That's 10% of the stadium, and just hand them out to nurses and doctors and first responders. It's crazy the apathy that the city feels towards the Sixers, despite having this great player in Tyrese Maxey.
Right. And by the way, this great player in Joel Embiid, who has been injured for some of these playoff losses, but like, I think it's a lot easier to look at like, hey, Ben Simmons forgot how to play basketball. And then James Harden just disappeared in the playoffs in a big game because that's what James Harden does. And it's like, Joel, it hadn't really been on Joel, and they win 50 games a year. And yet, I don't know. It's just, I find it hard sitting in Washington, D.C. to talk about the Sixers because I would kill for that basketball team compared to the absolute ridiculous, nonsensical mediocrity that we've had for 40 plus years, and literally longer than I've been alive in D.C.
Oh, yeah. Well, D.C. would sign up for, the Sixers problems. These are first world problems to Wizards fans. But, I mean, it is an interesting litmus test, I think, on tanking for draft, the patience you have for the fans. I think Sixers fans ultimately understood the process, stood by it. It'll deliver great players. But when it only delivers Embiid and then a host of problems like Okafor, Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz, etc., it's hard to stomach a number of years later that it was worth it because they're still being asked to be patient, and it should be already paying the dividends.
Well, that's the thing, though, is like they're in the competitive mold right now. Like, I would argue the process worked, and now it's on the players to ultimately finish the job because there's no such thing as guaranteeing yourself a championship or a finals appearance or a conference finals appearance. And the plan worked. They had, what I think this is like year 7 of 50 wins if they got to 50 this year. Like it's insane how competitive they've been for a decade, despite all those misses. But it also shows the importance of evaluation because if they had actually hit on those guys, and it looks like, in fairness to them, like there's no reason Ben Simmons should be what Ben Simmons is, unless there was a medical thing they missed with his back coming out of LSU. But like he was an all-star that was on pace to be defensive player of the year. And if they still had that dude, they'd probably be right there with Boston. But also I think you can look back at the Fultz decision when they could have just taken Tatum. And imagine if they had Embiid and Tatum, like, what are we talking about in Philly? So, like, the process worked. You just got to pick the players and then have some good luck along the way.
Yep, that's right. And Embiid and Tatum are reality right now for the 76ers, which might also be the torture that is causing Sixers fans to emotionally check out on their team.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you have in Phoenix, you mentioned the Suns collapse being a big thing on your show. I feel like Matt Ishbia is the dog sitting in the chair in the fire meme where he's like, this is fine. And it's like, no, dude. Yeah, I don't know if you saw the quote from him where he said, Moms would love to be in our position. And I'm like, no team wants to be in your position. Locked into a roster that can't win a championship. That's also, by the way, and most owners wouldn't be because it's very expensive and they very much could have a luxury tax bill of over $100 million. And because the new CBA is so restrictive, there are no real easy ways out. What would you do if you were the Suns? If I tell you, hey, you can either just run this back and pay an expensive bill. You can trade Durant. You can trade Booker. You can't really trade Beal because no one's taken his contract, and he's got a no-trade clause, something I know quite well from, again, covering the Wizards. But how screwed are the Suns? They're very screwed, Damon.
Oh, they're totally screwed. And this is the case of owners who get addicted to being the saviors. I mean, Robert Sarver was a disaster in Phoenix. Ishbia, just by purchasing the team, becomes a conquering hero. And now it's, I'm going to spend all the money and we're going to get stars and I'm going to show you, Phoenix, I want to be the hero, the hero, the hero. And so it's, let's go get Kevin Durant, green lighted. And then let's go get Bradley Beal, green lighted. Let's become a super team. And it's a disaster because they don't fit together properly and they have no flexibility to roster. And if I'm Matt Ishbia, what he's trying to do is to calm the fans down who suddenly have turned on him or the franchise because he really wants to be the hero. And he can't stand the idea of not being the hero. And by telling people, we've got to make major changes. But the fact is they do. And you have to get on the phone and call every single one of the general managers around you, all 29 of them, and say, can I interest you in Bradley Beal? Can I interest you in Kevin Durant? And like you said, you probably go 0 for 29 on Beal. But even if you go 1 for 29 in Kevin Durant, you have to listen. You have to try to figure that thing out. Because as they're presently constituted, they're a mess. They'll go nowhere. That much is obvious. You don't want to give up on Devin Booker because he's your best piece, homegrown, bona fide superstar, has a good attitude, seemingly all the things that you want to keep around, good community guy, etc. So you just have to try to do anything you can to move the other pieces. But who's going to take Kevin Durant at this point in time? And is Kevin Durant going to accept it because KD or get to Phoenix? This was his preferred destination. So I'm not sure you can even move him if you wanted to and got a deal, but you have to try because the way that they're built, it's a roadblock.
Yeah, definitely. The ultimate story would be if the Thunder fall short this year and they go Kevin Durant goes back to OKC. That's clearly what we need.
It's a great hypothetical, but I would say that they are built so well they don't want Kevin Durant back.
I would also agree with that.
Don't need Kevin Durant back. I mean, that's a team that loves one another, is supportive of everybody's roles, continues to gloss each other. Like, nobody wants the attention. Nobody is an egomaniac. Nobody needs to be the star. And it fits so well together, and they're a 1 seed. I mean, I just don't think you would have to ever mess with that chemistry right now by bringing in a hyper well-paid former aging legend to come in and, I don't know, absorb the oxygen in the room. They're so well built right now.
I do think Durant is the kind of guy, because he is so laid back, that just kind of fold in there. And it's like, yeah, this is our new small forward, Kevin, as opposed to what he's needed to be, which is an alpha, I dictate the entire franchise. And I think that is one of the things about this that is really interesting. It's clearly amazing. Sam Presti's the best general manager in the NBA. And what they've built there from an infrastructure standpoint, from the development staffs to everything. Their facilities are incredible, all of it. But they coddled Durant and Westbrook and those guys so much and insulated them from kind of the world of the media and everything that they left. And Russ, I think, has handled it by and large better than Durant. But certainly Durant got out into the real world and was like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff out here. And he was able to, they were so talented in Golden State that it didn't matter. But definitely I think we've seen in Brooklyn and now in Phoenix that it's yeah, man, once you apply non-Oklahoma City level gravity to you as a superstar, things and so much of what that organization in Oklahoma City does isn't done other places, and on the star is a lot higher.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation and a good way to break it down. And that's why I would say I would never bring KD back, because I don't want a moody superstar that can be in his feelings or can be apathetic or can be laid back. I don't want that around my young, hungry, excitable, energetic team. I just think the Thunder have they've got such a spirit. They've got such an energy. And I think that you start messing with that chemistry if you bring in a guy like Kevin Durant that seems pretty cynical, I would say, at this point in his career.
The CA show on Mad Dog Radio, Sirius XM, is with us here on the Hoffman Show. Switching gears back to the NFL draft real quick before we let you go, Damon. The Michael Penix move has been one that has been in the ire of most of the NFL. There was a great piece in The Athletic this morning from Mike Sando talking to a bunch of NFL executives about every NFC team's draft, and nobody that Sando talked to was defending the Falcons move. They're just there's no, why would you do that? Do you fall into that group, or do you have a counter take here?
Yeah, I fall into that group, and I think anybody that tries to defend it or rationalize it is using kind of this pretzel logic that just gets you tied up in the knots. The pure pragmatism is, if you have spent $100 million, 50 of those $1 million this upcoming season, that's $50 million this year or $100 million guaranteed that you cannot spend on a supporting cast to help Michael Penix. And if you draft Michael number 8, you have failed with a top 10 draft pick to support Kirk Cousins. And the quarterback is the simple, most important position in sports. And how do you support them? Well, you support them with offensive line or wide receivers, targets, a running game, a better defense, etc. You've taken two commodities, each one of which you've invested huge resources in, that cannot help one another at the same time. So it doesn't make any sense from a winning standpoint. Now, you want to say, well, it kind of like it hedges the bet of who's going to be great. So if Cousins isn't great, you have Penix, and if Penix is a bust, you have Cousins. Well, that's fine, but that's also not how you build a true winner, is by saying we might be wrong on this.
Right.
And I think that the reason that it is so illogical is that the decision didn't come from football people. And I've come around to the idea that this was an Arthur Blank idea, that Arthur Blank saw dwindling attention within the fan base, growing frustration because they were boring under Arthur Smith, and he was kind of cantankerous, and he wasn't a very interesting personality, and he said, we can't be boring, not in this market. Remember that this is a guy that built one of the most beautiful palaces in football and said, and I want the chicken sandwiches cheap, and I want the beer cheap, and I want the soda cheap, because we need to make it a fan experience. It needs to be very. I think that he was thinking the same thing here. And I think he was thinking, we can't be boring. So right now, we have to be interesting. So spend all the money on the quarterback. And once that's over, we can't be boring. So spend a high draft pick on Michael Penix and a quarterback. And that would make far more sense to me than football people putting this plan together. And I didn't think of it this way because we saw that video in round one without the audio of Arthur Blank seemingly being explained by Terry Fontenot what had happened with the draft, and maybe he was upset, like, why would you take Penix? But I spoke to Carl Dukes, who's a sports talk radio host in Atlanta, and he spoke to Terry Fontenot, and Dukes said, Fontenot said that's not what that conversation was about. He was explaining the rest of the first round and what they were going to do to Arthur Blank, but that the Penix draft pick was already done and Blank had signed off on it. So that makes me believe that, this was more of an ownership decision than a football decision.
Very much could be. And to me, it also just speaks to the fear of failure that actually prevents – this is going to be very philosophical, Damon. It's a fear of failure that prevents people from having success. That if you're too focused on, oh my God, we could be caught without a quarterback like they have the last couple of years in Atlanta, as Ritter wasn't good and other people got hurt and the Mel Mariota thing goes down, where he gets hurt and then leaves. Like all that stuff, Arthur Blank was like, that's never happening to me again. And it's like, okay, well then what's the upside of what you're actually doing? And the upside is lower than it should be because you spent a ton of money on Kirk Cousins and then didn't use the 8th pick to actually support him. Like you said, the best case scenario for them is that Cousins is awesome and you just spent the 8th pick on a guy that is not going to play for 3 years. And that's not a very good use of the pick. And I just don't understand anyone defends it any other way.
And it's really hard to defend even that hypothetical because he's already 24.
Right.
And so if he doesn't get on the field, Michael Penix starts, if Cousins is awesome, as a starter in Atlanta when he's 27 already. That's an old rookie.
Yeah. Well, and the thing, too, is like people are like, oh, they can move on from Cousins after 2 years. They can with a $25 million dead cap hit. It's not nothing to move on from years. Ideally, you move on in 3, and still then it's a $12.5 million dead cap hit. So, yikes, man. But yet there are people that there's NFL brain where people just think they can do everything. And I'm like, wait, how many Super Bowls have the Falcons won doing things this way? That's right. Not a single one. Damon Amendolara, morning, 6 to 9 a.m. on Sirius XM Mad Dog Radio. And then Sunday night, 7 p.m. on his YouTube channel, Watch DA Live. We had talked about me coming on that show, Damon, after the draft, and then things got crazy. I can get to you, I'm not coming on with you this Sunday because I don't know that I'm going to be awake by 7 p.m. Sunday because we're running a half marathon in the morning.
Look at this. Well, I was going to tell you, Hoff, that, we were going to have you on this past Sunday, and then Michael Penix happened. And I'm like, oh, wait, the entire draft got swallowed up by this ridiculous decision that the Falcons made. And so we had to go live to Atlanta with my friend Carl Dukes to talk to him. And so now I was like, well, we could have off on next week. I didn't know you were running the half marathon, but then I was going to say, but for the first time in my adult life, Washington football is actually nothing like scandalous to talk about or crazy or controversial. So like we have plenty of time to talk about Washington football because it's kind of like a nice quiet time for you.
Yeah, it's really weird. Now, in 2 weeks, on Mother's Day, the NBA draft lottery, there's a chance the Wizards get the number 1 pick. Ooh la la, you know? Welcome to my spring. I don't know what I'm going to talk about because the Commanders aren't on fire, but hey, the Wizards might have the number 1 pick in one of the worst drafts in a decade. Cool. Great.
I was going to say it would be totally Wizards' luck to win the lottery in what is the worst NBA draft of 20 years.
Don't remind me. Don't remind me. Damon Amendolara, everybody. Thank you, sir.
You got it. See ya.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team and the Odyssey app.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And suddenly, Anthony, my light here feels very bright. Not sure why, but it does.
You want to know what's going on over here?
What's going on over there?
I just spilled my popcorn.
No!
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do.
What kind of popcorn was it? Did you bring it from home or did you get it from the thing?
So my sister.
And how empty was the bag?
So the bag was actually like maybe 60% full.
Okay, so we didn't spill a full bag, which is better than spilling a full bag.
Spilled a decent amount though, and there's very little left.
What kind of popcorn was it?
This is the popcorn I got from my brother's popcorn like fundraiser. Like Double Good always does a popcorn. This isn't the first time I've ordered these. My sister had one, my brother had one, and every single time I get the In Queso Fire. Really good, really good.
Not for me.
Oh yeah, too much cheese.
But yeah. Then again, some of those things I'm like, I don't know. Is that real cheese?
True, that too. I don't know. I just know it tastes good. G-double-O-D.
G-double. Do you have more at home?
I do.
Okay,
I have
that's
probably
good.
like 5 more bags.
Because the show's over in 20 minutes.
Yeah, I try not to, eat too much. I'm a little upset that I'm eating these now, but
Well, maybe that was the universe looking out for you.
I guess that's a different way to look at it.
See, it's just, sometimes life is about perspective. It's a half full, half empty, fully empty.
Yeah.
But now you don't have to practice self-control.
Nope. But I got to clean this up.
I was going to say, you probably should clean that up, though. Because, we try to be good teammates around here.
Yeah, of course. I wouldn't do that.
I hope this isn't telling a tale out of school. But after Lynnell and Russell finished yesterday, they were trying to get this computer turned around for me because Lynnell, despite me asking him to use a different computer, insists on using this one, which I get. This is the better computer, but he has to sit over there. And I'm like, there is a computer up here. It's kind of a weird screen location and whatever. They were trying to put it around, and I'm like, hey guys, can you do me a solid, because we only have like 4 minutes from the time their show ends so our show starts, and there's a lot of setup that we have to do to get the video side on the air. Nevertheless, like, this is also the computer that we put the video in or put the video out from also is what I use to like research stuff. By the way, to make sure that I pay off the tease, we will talk about the NBA playoffs in a second. Damian Lillard is playing for the Bucks. That game is now started at 6-3. Milwaukee, 3 minutes into the game. No Giannis, yes Lillard. Anyway, now that I've done the radio thing and paid off the tease, people holding on, being like, sir, can you give me the information? Now back to telling stories about Lynnell and Rooster. And so Lynnell, like, is trying to turn the computer around. Russell's trying to get his big salad bowl and soup case, briefcase, whatever else he's got, and get out. And Lynnell just yells at Russell, why don't you be a good teammate?
Oh, wow.
I feel like there was real animosity that came out between them yesterday on the show. I said it when I sat down in the chair, like to start the show. I was like, I feel uncomfortable I feel like there's something lingering in the room.
It was a windbag Wednesday, so
it was.
Maybe.
It was.
Also, I saw Rooster tweet that him and Lynnell were on the opposite side of arguments, so I can only imagine how that went yesterday.
Yeah, I want to know what happens when they agree.
Do you think that happens?
Are they like, I don't know what to do with my hands?
I think we'll have another solar eclipse before that happens.
Don't look at those directly in the sun, kids.
Try not to.
No, it's bad. Make sure the glasses, understand how the glasses work. Don't have to roll around on the floor trying to find the sun.
That was me.
I was down there where your popcorn currently is. Didn't think that would go full circle.
No.
Anyway, who you got tonight?
In this game or the Sixers Knicks?
Yes, to both. Starting with Indy, Milwaukee, which we have a good luck live betting this one. Or I guess you could live bet it, but you can't get too far ahead of it. Currently, it's 13-6 Milwaukee.
I think I'm gonna go with the Bucks, man. This man, Damian Lillard, he's had a couple of nights off. He looks good so far. He's
got 5 points.
5
first 4
consecutive
minutes.
points. Yeah. Hey, he's looking good. I think they're gonna need more of that. We know what he did in game 1 of the series where he went off for 35 but didn't score again in the second half. But I think, early in the game, him scoring, fresh legs, I think that favors the Bucks more so. Just because Damian Lillard, he's been in these situations where he's had to carry his team.
Let me ask you this question. Who's the best player in this series? Not like Giannis is out. He doesn't count.
Damian Lillard.
You think Lillard's better than Halliburton?
Yes, it's not even close.
I think it's close.
I don't think so. Ever since he came back from his hamstring injury, Tyrese Halliburton has been a shell of himself.
Well, he definitely has not been, although he is 2 of 2 with 2 threes and his 6 points early in this one.
That's early.
Where did my Halliburton? Let's see. Game log. Halliburton, this series. Yeah.
Isn't Damian Lillard a top 75 NBA player of all time?
Yeah, but, I mean, that's based off what he's done. He's past his prime. He's still really good. Maybe at the end of his prime.
I think Dame is still in his prime.
Yeah, Halliburton's series high is 24. He did have the monster assist game in game 4. He had 18 points, 16 assists, 10
and he had
boards.
a clutch bucket, too.
Yeah, he's definitely not shooting it as well.
I'm not going to say,
I think during this, I think you might be right. Currently, the best player in the series is probably Dame.
Yeah.
But because Halliburton hasn't been back. Earlier in the season, when was that injury? When did he miss time?
He got hurt in, December or January, early January, late December.
Yeah, because early in the season,
he was cooking.
He was ridiculous. I mean, he started off, he had he had 2 40-point games in November, December. He was, dropped another couple of 30 pieces, but he really hasn't. But his assist numbers have been great.
He hasn't done too much since then.
Yeah.
I'm going down.
Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. I think, obviously, your futures bet is on Halliburton, but that's an age thing.
Yeah.
Who's the second best player in the series? Halliburton?
Probably Halliburton.
And then Siakam?
Yes, definitely Siakam.
But then it might be Middleton or Lopez. It's a pretty evenly matched series. It's hard. That's why,
now that Dame is back anyway.
Yeah, if the Pacers don't win tonight and Giannis plays in Game 7,
oh, it's curtains. It's good night, Irene.
It feels like it, but you never know. The NBA stuff gets wacky.
You're right.
All right, so I got the Pacers tonight. I think they're gonna come back. They'll be fine. Okay. Despite the hot start from Lillard. You've got the Bucks. See you in Game 7. Who you got tonight? Sixers Knicks.
Man, that is a tough question, Craig Hoffman. Sir, I think we're going to have 2 Game 7s on our hand, baby.
Really?
Yes.
I want the Sixers to win. I'm rooting for the Sixers.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Knicks are going to win.
Ooh.
I just think Jalen's going to have a 40. I'm going to call it 46 points for Jalen.
I think Jalen, he's going to have a big night. I think he's going to have a big night. But guess what? Joel Embiid, he called out the fans. The fans are going to show up. They're going to show out. I think Joel Embiid answers the call. Maxey also answers the call. I think they go out there. They get the job done tonight. I think it's going to be a close game. But I think if you go into the press conference saying, oh, we need our fans to go out and do this, well, you better come out here and bring your A game. We know Maxey's brought his A game all series long. And I think Joel Embiid, he's going to bounce back. He's not going to have another 9-turnover performance. And he's going to be able to, force a Game 7. In Wells Fargo Center. Let's get it, baby.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Is Maxey or Embiid, will Embiid match Brunson, or is it going to be on Maxey again? It just feels like it's too much. I love Tyrese. I'm the biggest Tyrese Maxey fan you'll find. I don't want him to be the best player in a series at this stage in his career yet. By 2 years from now, maybe. But especially when I have Joel Embiid, I want Joel Embiid to be the best guy. So,
hey, just like Kyrie was LeBron's bet man in those series, LeBron was the best player for sure. But you need Not a Batman, a Robin. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like he was his Robin. I think that's what Tyrese Maxey has been. And he said the last game at the end of the game, I got you, bro. Just trust me. I got you. So, hey, I trust Maxey.
I trust him too. The dude's going to compete his ass off every single night. All right. So Ant's on the Bucks and Sixers. I'm on the Pacers and Knicks.
That's crazy.
We'll see what happens.
Yep.
And we'll talk about it tomorrow on the Hoffman Show. We'll tell you what else is coming up on the show tomorrow. Plus, real things, real people said into real microphones next on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We are live on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Tomorrow on the show, I do believe we'll be catching up with Clinton Yates. Every time I tease Yates on the show, he doesn't show up, and then every time I don't, he does. So, take that for what it's worth. No, we've had a couple weeks. We've been doing a bunch of draft stuff, but I have some stuff I want to talk about with Yates. So I think we resume his Friday visits tomorrow. I also think we're going to be able to catch up with Bruce Feldman from The Athletic, their college football writer extraordinaire, who had very nice things to say in his draft recap column about what Adam Peters did. So we will get more praise for the Commanders. Yahoo! On their draft from Bruce Feldman. Anything else on the radar tomorrow? And obviously NBA playoffs. We'll see what happens with the Bucks-Pacers game, which is ongoing. Indiana now out in the lead. And we will see what happens with Sixers-Knicks tonight, including do fans show up?
Yes.
And which fans show up? Because we know fans will show up. Because that's the thing. Like, depending on where you live in New York, like, it just ain't that hard to get to Philly. You could go and be back for work tomorrow. Although I will say the 9 p.m. start, real pain in the you-know-what. That's brutal. East Coast, 9 p.m.
Yeah.
That actually probably prevents some New Yorkers from going.
Yeah.
I will say, if the Knicks win, the Amtrak back to New York tonight,
man,
it's going to be lit.
Gonna be packed.
Yeah.
The only other thing for tomorrow, the top young sports duos.
Yeah, that got a lot of traction on Twitter last night when I put that out there. You think that's a fun topic?
I'm thinking of one right now. I got two actually.
The most famous one I feel like is Wall Beal.
Yeah, but it's some
obviously
other
there's
ones.
been a lot of other great ones.
You got RG3, Alfred Morris, maybe.
See, but I don't.
Oh, you want to call them a duo?
Yeah, football's hard, and also because Alf kind of came out of nowhere, and then quickly kind of faded out.
He was a Pro Bowl. Was he a Pro Bowler his rookie year?
Yeah, I'm not saying that 1 year wasn't awesome, but
oh, you talking about what sustained success?
Well, it's also like, do you have the hype? Like, are you like, oh crap, we got to? I mean, maybe. I guess no. I feel like they definitely in their day, it was like, oh, we got these two rookies. No, that counts.
Okay,
that counts. RG3 and Alf, I'll give you that. Obviously, they didn't have staying power. I don't know how high they're going to get in the rankings.
Yeah.
But you got Wall Beal, Ovi Backstrom.
Yep.
Strauss and Harper.
Yep.
Got a bunch of. The funny thing is, like, truly the two best players who probably were on the same team at the same time that passed through here were also with the Spirit. There was a moment where Rose Lavelle and Mallory, now Swanson at the time, Pugh, were both here, and they are both long gone. But like, it's just different. The hype around the team was different. Where they were in their careers was different, and also Rose never played, so that was hard. Where Trent has been like a mainstay with the Spirit now for a couple of years, and now they got this rookie in Croy who's incredible, and they're such a good fit together. I think they could have a very long run. But it's fun to talk about like the duos.
Yeah, and I think
I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch too. So people screaming at their radios.
Maybe.
Well, that's the other fun one. Is like, who else is in contention right now?
C.J. Abrams.
Yeah, Abrams and James
Wood.
Yeah.
Josiah.
Yeah.
And look, we got some youngins over there.
Yeah.
Up and coming. So I don't know.
Yeah. I think there's definitely some good candidates. The Wizards. Can we get Shakira a partner? I like Aaliyah, but I don't know.
Who do we draft this year?
Aaliyah Edwards.
Oh, yeah.
She's only been on the show, or I've only interviewed her twice in the last 10 days.
Oh, yeah, because you had
we had media day, too.
All right.
But I don't think and then I guess, here's a fun one. Who are we counting with Jaden?
Harris.
Those young duos, Josh Harris and Jaden Daniels.
Oh, good gracious.
TBD still. But like, if all of a sudden he and Jahan.
Yeah, I was about to say, I guess we'll see what him and Jahan do this season. Maybe it's Ben Sinnott. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. That remains to be seen, to be honest.
If Jerzon Newton is awesome, then like, does it wind up being the Jaden and Jerzon?
Yeah.
You want to know what was wild? Logan and I were doing just going through a bunch of teams this morning. The Titans had 7 draft picks. 5 of them, their first name started with J.
Really?
And they passed on Johnny Newton. They could have had Newton. They took a row in the second round.
A row.
They could have gone 6 for 7 if they had just taken the guy at the position that everyone thought was the best player on the board.
Yeah.
And they would have had 6 of 7 draft picks with the first name J.
That actually caught me off guard when they did take him. Row.
You and everybody else. All right. It's time for real things, assuming that we have time for real things.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, we'll do a quick one here. Nalissa Smith is a member of the Indiana Fever, meaning she's newly teammates with Caitlin Clark, which means she's going to be playing in sold-out arenas this year, which is very different than her previous experience with the Fever.
We used to play in a barn. We used to play in a barn with 6 fans. Now we're going to be playing in sold-out arenas, and people are moving arenas to watch us play. It's just going to be huge for us this year.
You don't miss the barn?
I don't miss the barn.
I think she later went on to say that barn smelled like...
Yeah.
Poop. She might have tweeted that instead of saying it. Yeah. Also, real quick, we don't have time to play the sound, but shout out to a legend. Kelly O'Hara announced her retirement pending the end of the 2024 season. Key cog, of course, on the Spirits team. And, oh, by the way, a multiple-time World Cup champion for the U.S. Salute, KO. We'll see you tomorrow on Hoffman Show.